So what is up, guys? So this is back, and we are here with my NFL Week 2 predictions. Now, I always look forward to making these prediction videos just because it's a lot of fun. I can actually go off about some teams. And anyways, now, from my last video, which after Week 1, there came out my reaction to the Will Lutz game-winning field goal. Now, just to give you a little context, once again, that was filmed on Snapchat, and also, when I watch football, I turn to a different person. I was cussing like crazy. I also voice crack a lot. Whenever I yell like that, my voice just cracks a lot for some reason. But anyways, enough of that. Now, my last week, my predictions, they were actually very accurate. Like, I was 12 for 16, so I got 75% right, which is actually pretty good. The only ones I got wrong were the Falcons and Vikings. I said the Falcons, the Vikings won. The Titans and Browns, I said the Browns, the Titans won. Broncos and Raiders, I said the Broncos and the Raiders won. And finally, the Lions and the Cardinals, I said the Lions would win, but they tied. So that was very interesting. But anyways, right now I'm going to go off on my Week 2 predictions, so let's get this video started. Here we are with our very first matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they lost to the San Francisco 49ers 31-17, and then you had the Carolina Panthers who lost 30-27 against the LA Rams. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, once again, this is all about Jameis Winston. That was a huge reason they lost last week. You know, he threw 194 yards, 1 touchdown, which is okay, but 3 picks. And, Richard Sherman's back. Richard Sherman took one for a pick six. Two interceptions that Jameis Winston threw were pick sixes. Now, his decision-making is terrible. He has a chance to be the biggest quarterback draft bust since Jamarcus Russell. I think he's going down that way. They did all right on offense. And defense, they stopped the 49ers for a bit, but they just couldn't keep going. And then you have the Carolina Panthers who lost to the Rams. Now, Cam Newton, this team is going to live and die by him. Most teams live and die by their quarterback, but this is a huge one as, they can only Christian McCaffrey can do so much, as Christian McCaffrey was the workhorse. He had over 200 scrimmage yards, including receiving and rushing. That's insane. Cam Newton only threw for 239 yards. McCaffrey almost had as many yards as Cam Newton, and Newton also didn't get the rushing game going. He had 3 carries, but for -2 yards. Like, that's not Cam Newton. Cam Newton hasn't been the same since the shoulder injury. The defense it's tough for the defense going up against a high-flying offense like the Rams, but Jared Goff wasn't at his best, but the Rams, they made the least amount of mistakes. And going into this game, I think the Carolina Panthers are going to win because, Jameis Winston's just a terrible quarterback. For our next matchup between the Arizona Cardinals and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Cardinals, they tied the Lions 27-27, and the Ravens just embarrassed the Dolphins with a 59-10 victory. Now, starting off with the Cardinals, they didn't have a great start. Kyler Murray was a little bit shaky. I mean, the offensive line is still as bad as it was. He actually got sacked by his own offensive lineman. But the second half is when he really went off. David Johnson, he was a top running back in 2016. He came back a little bit. And the big one, of course, was Larry Fitzgerald is finally back. Like, after having a down season, he got 8 receptions, 113 yards, and a touchdown. Like, that is the Larry Fitzgerald that we have been waiting to see. And then you have the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson had himself his best game. 17 for 20, 324 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, that was against the Dolphins defense, which wasn't too great. I mean, even Lamar Jackson in his post-game interview said not bad for a running back, because there's been the joke that he's been more of a running back. And to be honest, he didn't even rush that much. He only rushed for 6 yards. But the defense was just as good as ever, especially Earl Thomas coming in at safety. If I got to pick a winner for this game, it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I still think Kyler Murray and what's his name again? Lamar Jackson, they're like both amazing at the rush and the pass, but, I mean, not as much as Lamar Jackson. But when it comes down to it, I think the Ravens are going to move on to the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Detroit Lions. Now, the Chargers won 30-24 in overtime, and, of course, the Lions, they tied the Cardinals. Now, the Chargers barely escaped last week with a victory, but I didn't expect Jacoby Brissett to be that good, but he had himself an amazing game. Like, he now has weapons on offense and actually a decent offensive line, so he's not getting eaten alive out there. But, of course, the Chargers, they had Phillip Rivers once again had himself a very good game. And once again, who even needs Melvin Gordon when you have Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen was just as good as ever as a receiver. Now, they did lose Hunter Henry, and that is a huge loss. Their top tight end. That is tough. And then you move on to the Detroit Lions, who completely choked last week. They led by 18 points, and they let the Cardinals come back in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, their final drive in overtime was just a mess. Matthew Stafford had himself a very good game. The rushing game, no. The rushing game wasn't as good, but TJ Hawkinson and Danny Amendola were completely legit. Like, they were amazing. Now, TJ Hawkinson went 6th overall. He might be worth that pick. No, not 6th overall. 7th. No, 8th overall. 8th overall. God, I keep getting it mixed up because 6 was the Giants, 7 was the Jaguars, and then 8 was the Lions. So, who's going to win this game? I think it's going to be the Chargers because I think they're just a better team. They're a lot more balanced than the Lions. Chargers have a better offense and a better defense than the Lions. Plain and simple. We now move on to the Indianapolis Colts versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, they came off a 30-24 loss against the Chargers in overtime, and then the Titans, they shocked everyone and beat the Browns 43-13. Now, to start off, the Indianapolis Colts, once again, I didn't expect much out of them. Jacoby Brissett played a very good game. I mean, he only threw for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns, but right now, I think the Colts, with their super good offensive line, they're going to be relying a little bit more on Marlon Mack, and that, of course, proved well as he had 25 carries, 174 rushing yards with a touchdown. He didn't do much on receiving, but he's more of a running back. T.Y. Hilton not dropping a beat. The defense wasn't too great, but they're going up against a team like the Chargers, so I can't be too mad at them. And then you move on to the Tennessee Titans. Marcus Mariota, he had himself a decent game. Derrick Henry ran over that defense. And the Titans, they were able to stuff Baker Mayfield, caused him to throw 3 interceptions. Nick Chubb, they stopped Nick Chubb enough, but they played a very good game. Of course, they shocked the Browns. There's not too much I can really go off of. A.J. Brown, he had himself 100 receiving yards on 3 receptions. If I want to pick a winner for this one, I'm going to go with the upset and say the Indianapolis Colts will run away with a victory over them. And now we move on to the San Francisco 49ers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Super Bowl rematch. I'm not sure which one, but Dad would enjoy this match since he's a 49ers fan and they beat them twice, and the 49ers beat the Bengals twice in the Super Bowl. So that's always good nostalgia for my dad. Now, let's start off with the 49ers who won 31-17, and then you have the Bengals who lost 21-20 against the Seahawks. Now, the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo, I still question a little bit because I think he's a little bit overrated because he had just one good stretch with the 49ers. Now, most of the teams they were playing were kind of garbage, and were mostly resting their starters, but he looked pretty legit. The beginning of his first game was not pretty, but, he kind of rebounded. The rushing game wasn't very relevant, but their defense looked a lot stronger than it was. Nick Bosa, Richard Sherman help that defense. And then you move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who came so close to upsetting the Seahawks. Now, Andy Dalton had himself a game, 418 yards and 2 touchdowns. The rushing game, who needs a rushing game? They barely had anything. Their main guy was John Ross. 7 receptions, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, John Ross last season barely got over 200 receiving yards. Now, he did battle a lot of injuries. He was freaking legit. The defense, they stopped Russell Wilson and the Seahawks for a while. But, of course, they couldn't stop him forever as Chris Carson tore apart that defense. If I want to pick a winner for this game, I'm going to go with the 49ers. I think the Bengals, it's just that game's going to be a one-hit wonder. Andy Dalton's not going to have as historically a good performance. The Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. The Jaguars, they lost the Chiefs 40-26, and the Texans, they lost to the New Orleans Saints 30-28 in a nail biter as they choked on the final drive. Get wrecked. Who Dat Nation on the rise. But anyways, I'm going to say it straight up. Jacksonville, you guys are screwed. Nick Foles, he has a broken left clavicle. He's going to be out for a while. He may be back for week 11. That's like the earliest they're seeing him, but I don't think so. You had Gardner Minshew. Who the hell is that? He actually played a decent game. 22 for 25, 275 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Now, the interception, that's not too good against a team like the Chiefs, but I am impressed what he was able to put up as a backup quarterback. Now, they did recently trade for Josh Dobbs. The defense was terrible, but you're facing the Chiefs. They're a legit team. And then you move on to the Houston Texans. Man, they came so close to upsetting the New Orleans Saints. It took them 2 plays, 75 yards in 14 seconds to tie up against the New Orleans Saints. Deshaun Watson had himself a great game, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, which he got picked off by Marcus Williams. Now, of course, they were able to get around the Saints. Deshaun Watson was able to outsmart the Saints a little bit just because of how mobile he was. DeAndre Hopkins completely lit up that defense. If I got to pick a winner for this one, pretty simple. It's the Texans. I don't know who the Jaguars are going to be starting, whether it's Gardner Minshew or Josh Dobbs. But it doesn't matter. It's the Texans. They will walk away. Move on to the classic NFC North rivalry between the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. The Vikings, they ran away with a victory over the Atlanta Falcons 28-12, and the Green Bay Packers ran away against the Bears 10-3. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, man, they played themselves a very good game. Kirk Cousins barely had to lift a finger as he only threw for 10 passes, and he only rushed for 4 yards and got a touchdown. He threw a touchdown and rushed for a touchdown. Their defense was legit as Kirk Cousins barely had to lift a finger. Dalvin Cook, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their offensive line got a little bit stronger, but that's exactly what the Vikings need. Kirk Cousins, they just need him to play decently, but they didn't really need him. They already have a great squad as they stunned top offense in the Atlanta Falcons, picking off Matt Ryan twice. And the safety that did that, who picked him off twice, was Anthony Harris, as he ended up with NFC Defensive Player of the Week. And then you go on to the Green Bay Packers, who won on opening day 10-3. Now, I question the Packers a little bit because, they got stuffed by the Bears, which I get. They're a legit defense, but their wide receivers and their O-line were pretty crappy last week. And now, the question is, was their defense good because Mitch Trubisky was that bad, or is their defense actually very good? Because Trubisky was terrible. His decision-making was terrible. Can the Packers, will they be better on offense? If I want to pick a winner for this, I'm going to go with the Packers. I think their offense will play well and their defense will be as strong as they claim it. Move on to another rivalry matchup. This time it's in the NFC East between the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Redskins. Now, the Dallas Cowboys, they just took a truck and ran all over the New York Giants. Dak Prescott, man, 405 yards, 4 touchdowns. Ezekiel Elliott, he played all right. Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper, Randall Cobb, it was literally like Oprah Winfrey. You get a touchdown, everybody gets a touchdown. It was an embarrassment. Not really an embarrassment. The Giants did not play well. Their defense was as legit as it was. Dak Prescott shocked me. He really did because, I always think he's kind of overrated. Mainly if he doesn't have Zeke, he's screwed. But he actually proved me wrong. Dak Prescott played himself a very good game. And then you move on to the Washington Redskins, who came so close to upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles as Case Keenum threw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was like he was back with Minnesota. And the rushing game was nothing. Terry McLaurin was their main part. Their defense did not play well. They got completely owned in the second half by Deshaun Jackson. Because Deshaun Jackson is the kind of guy who is a deep threat. If you give him a long pass, he will catch that. He will run that in for a touchdown. He is legit deep. The Redskins, Case Keenum played well. Vernon Davis did play in for Jordan Reed, and he played himself a very good game. If I want to pick a winner for this one, I think it'll be the Dallas Cowboys. Plain and simple. To our next matchup which is a rematch of Super Bowl 40 between the Seattle Seahawks and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers got creamed by the Patriots 33-3, and the Seattle Seahawks barely ran away with a 21-20 victory. Now, the Seahawks, Russell Wilson played a decent game, He was as good as he was. Chris Carson took a truck and ran all over the Bengals D. Now, the Bengals D isn't much, but they actually played decently last week. DK Metcalf was as hyped up as he was. Their defense didn't do so well. I mean, come on now. You gave up 418 yards to Andy Dalton and the Bengals. Like, this team is supposed to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. They did get a little bit stronger with Jadeveon Clowney in the offensive line, defensive line, I mean, but, they still played a decent game. They ended up running away with a victory. And then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were far from a decent game. They were absolutely terrible against the Patriots. The Patriots just knew what they would be doing. They stuffed Big Ben, James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Mike Tomlin had a few questioning play calls. So here we are in the third quarter. They were down by 20, and it's 4th and goal on the 1, and they decide to kick the field goal. Either you want to be down by 17, or you could either take a chance and try to be down by 13 or 14. I would obviously take the chance to be down by less. Ben Roethlisberger, jeez, that was just a terrible game. The Patriots defense was absolutely legit. Tom Brady completely ravaged your defense with Philip Dorsett and Josh Gordon and James White in the checkdowns. It was just not a good game played by the Steelers. And if I'm going to pick a winner for this one, I'm going to go with the Steelers on this one just because their defense is, the Seahawks defense is nowhere near is not going to be good against, nowhere near as good as the Patriots defense. And I think the Steelers, they will run away. We have another Super Bowl matchup, this time between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants. Now, the Bills ran away with a 17-16 victory over the New York Giants. And then the New York Giants, there's not much I can say about them because they got completely quashed by the Dallas Cowboys 35-17. Now, starting off with the Bills, it would be nice to see if their receivers could actually make a catch because Josh Allen, he threw for 254 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, but those 2 picks were on their receivers not being able to catch. John Brown was absolutely legit, 123 yards and a touchdown. And Devin Singletary, he had nearly 100 scrimmage yards, as he played very well. Josh Allen still has a bit of a rushing game, but he still needs to work on being a bit of a passer because he's wildly inaccurate. And then you have the New York Giants. They did not play well. I mean, Eli Manning threw for 306 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions. I was impressed. Saquon Barkley ran 120 yards. Evan Ingram was, of course, their top threat. The Giants, they did hold Saquon Barkley in receiving as he was only able to get 19 receptions. Their defense, I can't say anything about their defense. They were skinned alive by Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, if I got to pick a winner for this game, once again, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. I think they're going to pull off a bit of an upset over the New York. On to the New England Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins. Patriots coming off 33-3, and then you have the Dolphins, they came off a 59-10 loss. And the New England Patriots, they completely quashed the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tom Brady, they had their rushing game was okay, but their receiving game was just as good with mainly Dorsett, Edelman, Gordon, White, Burkhead. They were able to tear apart that defense. Devin McCourty with a clutch interception. Their defense was able to halt one of the best offenses in the game. Now, even though they did lose, the Steelers did lose Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, they still were able to completely quash them. And then you move on to the Miami Dolphins, who played a terrible game. Their defense was completely ineffective. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 185 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Their rushing game was completely stopped. So was their receiving game. They even did bring in Josh Rosen, who threw 3 passes, 1 for an interception. Now, for my prediction for this game, I'm going with the Miami Dolphins. Now, that sounds incredibly crazy, but hear me out. Something about Tom Brady being in Miami has always been a failure. Literally, like, I checked the analytics about 6 out of the last 8 times the Patriots have played in Miami, they have lost to the Dolphins. No matter how much they were favored by, it didn't matter. They lost the Dolphins. They lose the Dolphins. Like last year, they were on the cusp of winning, but then the Miami Miracle happened. Somehow the Dolphins always pull off a victory against the Patriots in Miami, and I think the Dolphins are going to pull off a major upset. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the Oakland Raiders. The Chiefs, they came off a 40-26 victory over the Jags, and the Raiders came off with a 24-16 victory over the Broncos. Now, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes was as great as he was. LaShawn McCoy, he finally had himself a decent rushing game because, with Buffalo recently, he hadn't done so well. He got 81 yards. I think their biggest loss, though, is they will be without Tyreek Hill, as he is going to be injured for, the next 4 to 6 weeks. But that's okay, because he got Sammy Watkins, 9 receptions, 198 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He completely lit up Saxonville. And then, their defense was able to stop Gander Minshew, but that's not much of a challenge, even though he did play a decent game. Once again, their defense is all the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. And then you have the Oakland Raiders, who took down the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos, they played all right, but you know what? The Raiders did well, too. Derek Carr, 22 for 26, 259 yards, and a touchdown. Joshua Jacobs, man, he was all as hyped up to be. 89 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns against that kind of offensive line, which is terrible. Tyrell Williams, 105 yards, a touchdown. They don't need AB. Having AB would be a lot better, but anyways, their defense did stop the Broncos, and of course, the Raiders survived a tough front 7 by Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. If I gotta get a winner for this one, Chiefs. Without it. Now we have 4 matches to go with the rematch of the 2018 NFC Championship game between the New Orleans Saints and the LA Rams. Now the Saints, they barely won against the Texans 30-28, and of course, the Rams, they came off a 30-27 victory. Now the Saints, well, Drew Brees was absolutely lit except that one interception that he threw. He had one bad pick that he threw, but other than that, he was straight fire. He led them to their final quarter drive, 38 seconds, got them into field goal range for Will Lutz to kick a miracle 58-yarder. The rushing game was just as good. Kamara was lit. Michael Thomas getting all those receptions. I still love having Taysom Hill. He's I don't know what the hell Taysom Hill's job is. He does everything. But if there's one thing I gotta be concerned about, it's our defense. Come on, we let the Texans run all over us in the final quarter. Now, going into that final drive that the Texans had, I've seen the Minneapolis Miracle. I broke down into tears over the Minneapolis Miracle. I knew we have to stop them. And I knew it's not a safe lead, despite what we have. They got no timeouts, but of course, they got it. But of course, can their defense bounce back from a near collapse? Now, the field goal kind of lets us forget about the defense. I'm not going to forget about the defense collapsing like that. And then you have the LA Rams. They came off a victory. Even though they didn't play themselves a great game, but of course, once again, they played very well defensively. Offensively, okay. Todd Gurley, nowhere near as explosive as he was last year. Didn't get a touchdown. Malcolm Brown, he's right behind him. Jared Goff didn't play himself a great game. 186 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Not his greatest game, but once again, they made the least amount of mistakes against the Carolina Panthers as they almost got ran over by Christian McCaffrey. Now, if I got to pick a winner for this game, it's going to be the New Orleans Saints again. I think, our defense is going to play a little bit better because Jared Goff is going to be nowhere near. Jared Goff is just going to struggle like he did against the Panthers. Plain and simple. The Chicago Bears versus the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos, they came off a 24-16 loss against the Oakland Raiders, and then the Bears came off an embarrassing opening day loss 10-3. Now, the Bears, I'm concerned about, not about their defense. Their defense is lit, but of course, the team lives and dies by Mitch Trubisky. So, he had himself horrible decision-making, 228 yards and an interception. Their rushing game was terrible, because, you know what, they decided, let's go with Mike Davis instead of a reliable player like David Montgomery. Now, I know he is a rookie, but David Montgomery would do much better than Mike Davis. The receiving core was, of course, mainly held by Allen Robinson. You know, Tariq Cohen played decently. Their defense was just dangerous, but Aaron Rodgers had just one good drive, and that's it. And then the Denver Broncos, you know, they barely lost to the Raiders. Now, they didn't play Phillip Lindsay enough. They had Royce Freeman. Their rushing game was not good. Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders were very good at receiving, but they were really everything for the Broncos, because Joe Flacco, king of the checkdowns, did not have himself a good game. 268 yards and a touchdown, but it was disappointing going up against a defense like the freaking Raiders. If I want to pick a winner for this one, I think the Bears will rebound. Our Sunday Night Football matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. The Eagles barely running away with the 32-27 victory, and the Falcons losing to the Vikings. Now, the Eagles, Carson Wentz had a tough start, but nearing the end of the game, he did come back into that elite 2017 MVP-like season. Deshaun Jackson was just as lethal as ever. Deshaun Jackson, once again, is just a deep threat. If he goes deep and you throw him a pass, he'll run for that, he'll catch it, he'll burn your secondary. Their rushing game was meh, and their defense was just not good, because they let a journeyman in Case Keenum play like he was with the Vikings again, after having a disappointing season last year with the Broncos. And then you have the Atlanta Falcons, who came off a disappointing loss to the Vikings, as Matt Ryan had a tough beginning. He threw for 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 picks. The rushing game went absolutely nowhere. Devontae Freeman was absolute crap. The receivers, well, they were all right. Their defense was just okay, but of course, Kirk Cousins barely had to lift a finger, as you guys got completely torched by Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook did way more than Kirk Cousins, so that is a point of concern, and that is why I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game. Going to our final matchup between the two of the biggest disappointments from last week, the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Now, the Browns, they lost 43-13 against the Jets, and then the Jets, they lost to the Bills 17-16. Now, I'm going to make this quick, because let's start out with the Browns. Baker Mayfield, they were supposed to be a new team, completely legit. But, of course, they choked. Baker Mayfield threw 3 picks, and their offense, they got off to a pretty decent start, but people were saying the Browns were overrated. I thought they were a little overrated, and that proved my point, but I thought they were going to have a very good game. They did not. And then, I got to make this quick once again, so then we move on to the New York Jets, who, well, completely choked. They had a 16-0 lead. They made the Bills turn the ball over 4 times, and they completely choked. Sam Darnold is questionable. 175 yards and a touchdown. Le'Veon Bell couldn't get much going on the rush game, but of course he did get some receiving, as he didn't get over 100 scrimmage yards, but that's okay. Their defense was pretty good. They had a very good defense, mainly led by Jamal Adams. And of course, back to the Browns, their defense, they got owned by the Titans. Now, I'm going to make this prediction. I'm going to go with the Browns. My video for today. Thank you all so much for watching this. If you want to see my week 1 predictions, links in the description below. Make sure to like this video, comment down below what else you want to see. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, and make sure to follow me on Instagram and Snapchat at Suda the Savage. Thank you all for watching. Have a good day. Who Dat Nation, Suda the Savage, out.